Welcome, classic rock fans, to the 10 worst on-stage faux pas. These are incidents that have taken place while the artists are performing on stage, rather than things that have gone awry with the audience and security, like Altmont, of course, and that dreadful incident in Cincinnati in 1979 when The Who performed there. So let's consider the 10 worst on-stage cock-ups. Warning, this is not for those of a nervous disposition. Number 10 is the Foo Fighters in Gothenburg in 2015. Douglas MacArthur said, "You're remembered in this life for the rules you break," rather than limbs, of course. Unfortunately, Dave Grohl took the expression "break a leg" way too literally here, when during a particularly intense performance of Monkey Wrench, he failed to notice the edge of the stage, consequently toppling over it, falling 8 feet and breaking his leg. The last thing that Gothenburg audience heard was Dave Grohl's voice emanating from almost below the stage, stating, "I've got to go to hospital to get my leg fixed. We're going to come back and play for you soon." Number 9 is U2, Vancouver, also 2015. Another similar incident, really, with the edge failing to notice the edge of the stage whilst performing. "I still haven't found what I'm looking for." My word, there's a joke to be had there, I'm sure. It seemed the Edge was far more interested in surveying the vast crowd than he wasn't actually looking where he was going. He topples from the stage and had to be attended to by the staff there at the venue. But luckily, oh the irony, but luckily it was their last song, so Bono managed to keep things going while he was being attended to before the band exited the stage in planned fashion. Number 8 is Frank Zappa from 1971. Oscar Wilde said, "The world is a stage, but the play is badly cast." Well, it seems that Zappa was pushed from his stage and kind of ended up in a cast. It seems the figure of the jealous lover, that archetype of literature and popular culture for generations, reared its ugly head here. As bands were pursued mercilessly by jealous husbands and boyfriends, the rage of the cuckolded male. It's almost like something from Chaucer, where the mustachioed one gets pushed from the stage by the enraged lover. The man in question, actually, was Trevor Howell, whose girlfriend, I think, or wife, had developed a crush on Zappa. Well, that night, Zappa had started to perform a particularly Zappa-esque version of the Beatles' "I Want to Hold Your Hand," and this was way too much for young Trevor here, who mounted the stage in a rage. And there was an altercation ensued and Zappa fell from the stage, I think breaking his leg as well. Broken legs, it seems to be a theme of this video so far. This happened at the Rainbow Theatre in London on the 10th of December 1971. Number 7 is the Rolling Stones from 1965. It's Sacramento in California. Richards has described this in his autobiography as one of the most spectacular of all the close calls that he has had during his career. It was December the 3rd, 1965, the Rolling Stones were playing The Last Time. And it almost was for Richards as his guitar touched the mic stand, causing a massive electrical surge which saw him slump to the floor. There is a truism, of course, that goes something like, "You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes you get what you need." Here's betting that Circuit Breaker was put on Richards' Christmas list that year. Mick Martin, who attended the gig, said he was absolutely horrified, as all the crowd were, as Richards flew backwards, apparently. Richards was given oxygen and taken to hospital. Apparently, he was probably saved by the thick soles on his hush puppies. Number 6 is Paul McCartney, London, July 13th, 1985. This is probably the most widely broadcast cock-up ever. Of course, it's Live Aid. McCartney was to take the stage to woo or serenade the Wembley crowd with that Beatles classic "Let It Be." You should have changed it to "Let It Be Plugged In," I think. Because the mishap, the band that would perform McCartney, I think somebody had unplugged the microphone and forgotten about it. It was quickly rectified, of course, plugged in after about a minute of McCartney regaling us with complete silence vocally anyway. McCartney went into the studio and recorded the missing vocal part that was added to the subsequent broadcasts. Number 5 is Aerosmith in the Inglewood Forum. I think it was 76, 77, something like that. Now, Steven Tyler, of course, who was pretty much a stranger to sobriety during this period, had lots of pills and things wrapped up in those chiffon scarves that beautifully and enigmatically were wrapped around his mic stand. Audience members have suggested they saw many of them just dropping to the floor, as well as Tyler troweling them, swallowing as many as he could. The band had only gone through about 2 songs, I think, before Tyler dropped the mic stand and I think effectively fell from the stage. The band continued playing while things sorted themselves out before eventually the lights came back on and it was announced that the show could not continue. Number 4 is the Kinks and the famous Capitol Theatre bust-up, which took place in Cardiff in 1965. It's unusual for such an event because the Kinks are known for their such harmonious interband relations. Oh, the irony. Well, this incident took place, it was actually the night before when Dave Davies was criticising Mick Avery whilst he'd had a few, I suspect. Assuming that Mick Avery had this rhinocerine hide and all these barbs and pinchers wouldn't get to him. But this spilled over the next day whilst on stage. Dave Davies said to Mick Avery, "Why don't you hit the snare with your cock? It would probably sound better." Of course, Mick Avery leapt up in defence of his drumming, and his cock no doubt, and thumped Dave Davies, knocking him out. Of course, Dave had to go to hospital and needed 16 stitches, so Mick Avery must have lamped him one. Number 3 is Kiss and the fan maiming incident. Surely Gene Simmons would be the first to acknowledge that maiming your fans is perhaps not good business practice. Unfortunately, perhaps wasn't that savvy in 1973 when the band were just kind of starting out, and in this case they were actually supporting Blue Oyster Cult. This took place at the Academy of Music gig in 1973 in New York. Kiss, of course, were famed for their onstage pyrotechnics and theatrics. Gene Simmons, as part of his act, was lighting this flash paper and throwing them out into the audience above their heads where they would explode into sparks, and probably looks fantastic. Unfortunately for Gene, he didn't reckon that some numpty that night would be standing on his chair. Of course, Gene lights the flash paper and throws it out into the audience for dramatic effect, hitting the poor bastard square in the face. They apologised profusely, brought the guy backstage, probably gave him a t-shirt. Gene probably only charged him half price for the t-shirt that night. Whilst their band manager was drafting a contract or a waiver for the fan to sign, which he readily did. As he was being taken to hospital, he declared that Kiss were his favourite band. There's one born every minute, isn't there? I'm talking about his favourite band. I don't think Gene was having a particularly good night that night either, as I think he set his own hair ablaze during his fire-breathing firehouse bit. Number 2 is The Who left without a drummer. This was in 1973. The band were performing at Cow Palace in San Francisco, I believe. Keith Moon had apparently necked some tranquilizers of pretty potent stuff apparently backstage, as well as washing it down with a bottle of brandy. Of course, subsequently, the end result is pretty predictable, isn't it? He slumps unconscious while the band were performing Won't Get Fooled Again. But they managed to revive him with a cold shower and a few slaps, brought him back on stage, and he slumps again. I think they were playing Magic Bus. It was at this point that Pete Townsend announces to the crowd, "Anyone out there can play drums, we need somebody good." It was then a Thomas Scott Halpin answered the call, and he got to mount the stage and drum with The Who that night. Pete Townsend eventually apologised to the crowd and saying, we should be applauding you for your patience and understanding. Quite a moving aside to this story is that Thomas Scott Halpin died on February the 9th, 2008 from an inoperable brain tumour, and The Who paid tribute to him on their website. Number 1, the biggest onstage faux pas as far as I'm concerned, is Twisted Sister. They were playing a gig in New York in the late 70s. Now, as typical for a metal band at this time, they saw themselves in opposition to disco. That trend that was seizing the hearts, the minds and the trousers of a whole generation. Well, Twisted Sister decided, how can we use theatrics in accordance with our stage presence and performance to demonstrate our hatred of this genre, this music? The answer was they decided they would hang disco in effigy from the stage. Unfortunately, that effigy was of Barry White. Now, Dee Snider is an intelligent chap, he really is, so I'm surprised that the implications of that didn't occur to him. Now, interestingly, the club owner approached Dee Snider and Twisted Sister, made some very crass and racist remarks after the gig, which illustrated just how inappropriate this disco-hating gesture was. Dee Snider and Twisted Sister were absolutely mortified, really, when they heard this. Dee Snider said in his autobiography, "We explained that hanging Barry White in effigy was purely symbolic, reflecting our attitude towards disco as an art form." So there you are, that's what I consider the 10 worst onstage faux pas in classic rock. Let me know which one was your favourite and which ones you think I should have included in this video. Other than that, I'll leave you with my closing salvo, which is hope you're well, staying safe, and of course that you keep listening.